Hello, and thanks for tuning in to Powell Software's Welcome to the New Normal. Powell Software develops digital workplace solutions that improve the employee experience, helping companies write their own future of work by leveraging the talent of their entire workforce. My name is Tony Todd. I'm from the Rumeur Publique agency in Paris. And in this podcast series, we've been speaking with business leaders, thinkers, visionaries to explore the megatrends, the ecosystems, the technology, the philosophy, shaping the way we live and the way we work as the economy recovers and as we emerge into the new normal. Today we have with us Amiel Kornel. Hello, Amiel. How are you doing today?
Very good, Tony. Thank you.
Amiel is the founding partner of VentureCraft Studio, which has clients in the US from San Francisco and in Europe, based out of his offices in Paris. He's also the author of Spinning into Control, Improvising the Sustainable Startup, which is a fascinating read, and there is a lot in there that is relevant to how we need to adapt to the new normal. So the core of this book, Amiel, is improvisation and how to be resourceful. What exactly do you mean by improvisation? We've learned a lot in the pandemic. Nothing goes according to plan. We need to be able to do things instinctively. What exactly does that mean? How would you define that?
Well, improvisation, Tony, is the ability, in the workplace at least, it's the ability to solve problems and to seize new opportunities in real time with whatever resources you have on hand. How
does that change from the traditional way of working, rules and hierarchy? Does that mean that people have to be more free, that managers have to be more free with their employees? What does it mean in practical terms for teams and companies?
Well, I like to think of it as freeing oneself from the tyranny of planning, Tony. I think that one of the problems that we've faced traditionally in both small and large organizations is that we over-rely on planning and structured experimentation. And one of the consequences of that is that we fail to see reality for what it is, and we lose our ability to adapt to reality as it's changing in real time. So in an adaptive, resilient organization, the employees as well as the leaders embrace improvisational skills as much as they embrace planning, and maybe even more so. Also, just coming back to something you said earlier, Tony, I want to emphasize this is not only about adopting a certain mindset or attitude. Those things matter, but actually they can be very hard for a lot of people. This is why change is so difficult to achieve in a lot of organizations. Our psychology can be our worst enemy sometimes. What improvisation is, at least in the sense that I talk about, is it's a skill. It's a skill that we're born with, but that we lose over time if we don't intentionally work at developing it, and if we're not encouraged to develop it by the leaders in our organizations.
So, I mean, what can leaders do to foster this improvisational way of working? I know that, for a lot of managers who might be watching this thinking, how on earth am I going to encourage my teams to be more improvisational? How are they going to go about doing that?
Good question, Tony. And maybe the best way for me to answer that question is by telling you a story.
Okay.
About 20 years ago, I was on the founding team of a software company in San Francisco. And we were developing an enterprise solution for search with a very novel graphical user interface.
Okay.
And I was the COO. So in those days, I was a strong believer in planning. I lived by planning and road mapping and metrics and milestones. But the CEO and chairman of the company, a very mischievous and brilliant man named Joel Schatz, he had a very different attitude. He didn't really adopt the scientific approach that I was trying to promote within the organization. He was behaving much more like an artist. he was continuously challenging us to adapt to shifting market conditions, but also shifting objectives. And so what I learned as the COO of that company was that there are other things that are even more important in planning, and that's improvisation. What a CEO can do, like Joel was doing in those days, or a senior manager for that matter, is to, one, articulate very clearly and simply the mission of the project or the business. Two, ensure that the organization has just enough resource, sufficient to get the job done, but not too much, because sometimes having too much resource at our disposal can lead us down the wrong path. We become lazy, or we overdevelop our products before we really have market validation. And last but not least, the leader should be encouraging, as Joel did with us at the San Francisco software company, to continuously improve our skill at improvisation.
Okay, very interesting that you say that teams shouldn't be overburdened with too many resources. Do you mean that it's better to be lean and mean as a way to improvise?
Absolutely. It's better to be capital efficient for a lot of obvious reasons. It means that you don't have to spend so much time raising capital. It means that you can remain in control of your destiny longer because you haven't suffered the dilution of raising equity capital. And it also means that you are more resourceful. Having to work within constraints can actually be a blessing, because it forces you to think more creatively about how to solve a problem or how to seize a new opportunity.
And I suppose the necessity is the mother of invention, that if you have to do it, then your mind is going to improvise and go ahead.
That's right. You know, in my book, I write about a number of brilliant people, not only entrepreneurs, but also master artisans, an investigative journalist, and even an ocean racing sailor. And in all of those stories, there's a common thread, even though they come from very different backgrounds. And that common thread is that they were often, and almost always actually, resource constrained or facing some other significant constraint. And they found a way to surf those constraints, to actually use them to their benefit, so that they could develop more creative solutions for the situation they were in.
We're at the beginning of 2022 now. Now, for the last 2 years, your typical employee has spent a lot of time working from home. He's now in a hybrid situation. Watching this video, Amiel, and listening to you talk, he's thinking, I'm going to make a New Year's resolution this year. I want to be more improvisational in the way I work in order to be more successful. How do I take the first steps on that journey? What are the first things that I need to put into my head in order to make that a reality?
Well, first of all, let's talk about what it isn't. This is not about spontaneity. This isn't about just doing whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
This is more like developing the skill set that a jazz musician or a comedy actor develops. Jazz musicians fully appreciate the importance of improvisation. It's at the core of their music, and it's at the core of their conversation between themselves when they're performing. And that ability that they have to improvise doesn't just come out of nowhere, Tony. They work very diligently at refining that skill of improvisation in any way they can. They do it, of course, when they're playing their music, but they even do it in the way they live their lives. And so I would encourage people who are working in a hybrid environment or working entirely remotely to think of themselves more as musicians or explorers, and to continuously be on the lookout for opportunities. It might be in their personal life or in their professional life, to practice their improvisational skills. You know, I think if they follow my advice, they'll actually discover that it can be a lot of fun. You know, children improvise all the time. Improvisation is at the core of play. And so another way to talk about what I'm advocating here is, let's all have a lot more fun.
And I suppose a perfect first step on the journey would be to order this book online, or buy the ebook, download it straight away, and start reading about how to improvise, how to be more resourceful, and make 2022 a different year for all the best possible reasons. Amiel Kornel, thank you so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure, Tony.
Really interesting chat. Do get the book. It's a great read, and it opens up a new way of thinking about how you work, what your objectives should be. It's a great book. And we will see you again in 2 weeks' time with another episode. We're going to be looking at investing for the future of work. Thanks very much for joining us today. See you again soon. Bye.